All right. And we're just going to cut right into it. So we'll give a little bit of time here. We'll do one of these so you know how to cut. Welcome back. We are continuing season 22, episode 2. So it's just 222 today, too much. We got to figure out what our topic's going to be. And I'm thinking, because you were going, as you're going through it, the overview summary, that maybe the first one we talk about is, and I talked too long and now I forgot it. I will come back to it in a moment. Oh, when you become a developer, what I'm thinking about is the progression from writing code, just a coder, to when do you realize you're a developer? Or maybe it is, what are some signs that you're a developer if, something like that. Because I think all of us had that point where, if I think back even in my childhood, where there's a certain point where it's like, I'm just writing code. And there's a point where you get what's like, oh, it's not really about writing code. It's really about solving that problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, that brought back memories of, college trying to be a doctor and taking all the medical courses, but yet I'm writing all the code for all those seniors that can't pass Pascal.
That has been, sometimes that's what like gets you into it is it's like, oh, I'm not doing this all the time. I'm doing this thing over here. So maybe I should do this cool little coding job thing. And then, it sort of builds into where it's not just like, hey, I'm making an extra buck on the side writing some code, but now I'm solving business problems. And now it changes from, I love to write JavaScript to I just like solving problems on computers and, leveraging that technology. So cool. We'll see where this goes because this is so heavily scripted, just like the last time. Hello and welcome back to episode 2 of season 22. And we are two people talking about development. We're talking about building better developers. We are Developreneur. We're talking about how to build better developers. This is the podcast. This is the place to be. This season, we are talking about the developer journey. This episode, we're going to get into a little bit. It's more of like a retrospective for ourselves, but it's how do you know what was that point where you go from being a coder to becoming a developer? What are the things maybe that pointed you to being a developer, which is really, I know we've talked about it here and there, but the gist of it, this episode is going to be about like turning from that person that likes to just sit there and write code to that person that's actually looking at how to solve problems and how to write better code. I would love to become a better host, but I'm not. I'm going to continue with the same thing where I talk too much before I introduce myself. My name is Rob Broadhead. I am one of the founders of Developreneur, also founder of RB Consulting, where we solve problems. That's what we do, but really focused on simplification, automation, and integration of systems because technology sprawls all over the place and we like to come in with our little broom and stuff and clean it back up and make it nice and neat and put it in a nice little box and little ribbon on the top and maybe a little chocolate. I'm going too far because now I'm going to let you go over to Mike. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, everyone. My name is Michael Malash. I'm one of the co-founders of Developreneur, also the founder of Envision QA, where we help small businesses, mid-sized businesses, and clinicians write custom software to help automate their business needs.
So I'm going to tell a little story about way back. One of the things that was a turning point for me from being a coder to a developer. And this is in high school, and I had taken some courses. I knew a little bit of programming, stuff like that. And we actually were doing a programming competition. And we had gone the year before, and the programming competition, I don't remember the language. I want to say it was BASIC. It may have been Turbo Pascal. Or it may have been whatever you wanted it to be. It may have been that they had a couple of different things. But the whole point is they would give you a list of all these little problems, these little like mini code things. They're usually basically like, write a function to do this. And it was like basically write a little application that does this, takes two numbers and adds them together, or takes a number and then generates a matrix of that size, or whatever it is. It's always just like random little things. So they're all little sort of self-contained programming problems. We had a team of 4 people. First year I went, I think it was my junior year of high school. We ended up in second place. We split it up. There's 4 of us. We've got one computer for the team because that's what you had. And so each team had one computer. And so what we did is we would sit there and like crank out our code, like write it out on notebook paper. So solve it there, pseudocode it. And then we would take turns sitting in front of the computer and typing our stuff in, save it off, however it was that we sent it to them. I think we printed it out and then they re-entered it. Really efficient system. I digress. We ended up in second place. The next year, we said, all right, it's not about programming. This was like, how do we win? What went wrong? What stopped us last year that we can correct so we can win this year? And one of the things was that one computer. It was like we would sit there and we write and we had to like transfer it out and all that kind of stuff. Now, yeah, if we could have brought a second computer, that would have been cheating. It would have been awesome. We would have kicked their butt. Instead, we're like, well, what can we do? What we can do is we can find somebody that can type faster than we can. And so we went from a team of 4 coders to 3 coders and somebody that understood general, basic programming stuff. So understood programming a little bit, but typed faster than any of us. We were like maybe 40, 50 words a minute. It was this lady that was a girl because we're in high school, but this girl that was like could crank out 80 to 90, words a minute. And even with code, she could just really crank through it. So if it would take us 10 minutes, take her literally like 5 or 6 minutes to enter the same stuff. The shortest part of that is we won. We like smoked everybody else. And it was like, I will never forget, we're sitting there and we're like, they didn't announce, but third place, second, and then first. And so it's third place. And it's like, oh, and then second place, like, oh. And the team that beat us the year before, they hadn't announced them yet. And so we're like, crap, I bet that just didn't work. And they announced us. So we're like, yeah, in your face, all of you people. And we never told anybody what we did until years later. I think we finally let the secret out. It's like, yeah, we just switched up our team and decided to type faster. Now, that to me was a turning point because it wasn't about writing code. Now, technically, you would say, of course, a programming contest is about writing code, but really, it never is. And especially now, there's a lot of these contests out there, these hackathons and stuff like that. It is not about writing code. It is about solving a problem. It doesn't matter how you get there. This is a problem. How do you solve it? And usually you are graded or scored on the best solution for that problem. Now, that I think when you shift your mindset from I need to write a bunch of code to solve this problem to sort of almost like reverse. I need to solve this problem. What is the best way to solve this problem? And then how do I make the code solve that problem? Is very much like if you think about like test-driven development, some of these things that have become more modern. But to me, that is a quintessential point in your journey. Is there that point where you shift from I'm writing code, I'm really cool, I can do some code stuff, to I'm solving problems. I am finding a way to use technology to solve my problems. And now I will pass this on to you and allow you to solve this problem for a little bit. Like, what are your thoughts? And maybe do you have another like linchpin in the history of yourself where you're like, this is where I went from coder to developer?
I actually had a different kind of start. So I went through high school doing all pre-med courses because actually I wanted to become a surgeon when I was in high school. I still took all the math classes. I liked programming, but I liked it more of a hobby. So I learned all the Pascal, but I had a math teacher that basically enforced documentation to the nth degree, to the point that we weren't really learning how to code or weren't really learning how to write logically. We were learning how to write documentation, and that applied nothing. It bored me to tears. So I'm like, yep, I'm going to be a surgeon. Forget this. I'm just going to dabble in this and play with this. Get to college, and while I'm taking all my pre-med courses, I worked in the central supply office in the infirmary on campus. And in my daily job, I had to keep track of our inventory within our central supply. We were basically providing all the medical supplies to the infirmary. And this is back in the probably about mid-90s. And databases aren't really a big thing on Windows yet at this time. So, but what we had was we had Excel, we had Access, and we were keeping track of the entire inventory system in Excel. Every time something came in, we had to update one field, update it another, in, out by department. And through my first semester, okay, I learned how the software worked. I learned data entry. I learned how to keep track of inventory. But by the second semester, I'm like, why are we doing this? This is antiquated. There's a lot of double entries. Things weren't making sense. So I started learning VBA or macros within Office, which is another form of programming. But what you're thinking is you're now taking a process and you're breaking it down into its components and you're starting to write little automation steps or macros to simplify the process. By the end of my second semester, by the start of my third semester, I had actually taken the entire Excel spreadsheet system we had and had actually dumped it into Access and had rebuilt the whole thing as a database and automated the whole system. Now, mind you, I'm doing all this while I'm studying to become a surgeon. I'm taking biology, chemistry, anatomy. I'm taking no coding classes. I learned all this, and this was actually even pre-internet. We didn't really have internet at the time. We had BBSs. So I had to pick up books in the library, learn how to do these things. And it actually piqued my interest. I'm like, there's got to be a better way to do this. So you start down that journey, not necessarily as a coder, but as a problem solver. And you're like, there's got to be better ways to do this. So you start thinking of automation, you start thinking of scripting, and then you get into coding and you're like, wow, this is kind of cool. Okay, you take the next logical leap. Now, long story short, my journey to become a surgeon kind of fell flat once I got into the classes where I had to deal with needles because I have a phobia so bad that I passed out. And I couldn't make it through the class long enough to stay awake or conscious without passing out in class. So had to pivot, and I've decided, well, I'm good at this. I really like software. I like coding. And I decided to give it a whirl. And heck, here we are 20 plus years later. And I'm loving it.
I think you touched on something that I have found with a lot of people, particularly customers that I've worked with, is that sort of that aha moment where they're working in, usually it's like Excel or Access or something like that, some tool that helps you get some of these things done. But then when you jump to the next level where you realize that now where you're working in something, you're not in this constrained environment, and you're especially with like a general programming language, because honestly, there are very few things from a programming point of view, there are very few things somebody's going to ask for that you're not going to be able to say that is possible. Now, it may be very costly, it may be very expensive, it may be very fragile. For example, like scraping is a big thing these days. People go out, they're getting data from all these different sites, and I see all these places that are like, oh, I'd love to have a customer Rolodex, basically. So I want to go look at every website in the United States and be able to grab a phone number and a name and an email address and a mailing address. Yeah, that'd be awesome, but those things don't exist on all these sites. And then sometimes they're protected and they're in different formats, and there's all these different things that you have to deal with. So it could be done, but it's going to take a long time because you have to go through and find all of the cases basically and find a way to address all of them. You're going to be able to get some, 80-20 rule. You get a lot of stuff the first time around, but the closer you get to 100%, the more time consuming and expensive it becomes. And so I've had numerous customers, but are in that first leap, particularly where they're in this thing that they've got a solution that sort of works. They're in a spreadsheet and it works. I mean, it's like they can move data around. It can add numbers. It can do some things they need it to do. They've got some formulas in there. And when you take that spreadsheet, I don't know how to touch this, but we take that spreadsheet and we just put it into a web application. Now they lose the spreadsheetness. I don't know how often they come back. It's like, well, we like the Excelness of this, where I can like just click on cells and enter some data. And a lot of times we end up building that back in for them. We have some way to build something like that for them. But somewhere along the way, they realized that that was actually maybe inefficient for what they're doing. No, it may be something where I'm swatting at flies. If you're watching the video, it's like there's a little gnat that keeps going around. So it's not me trying to do hand signals or like sign language. It's me trying to find this little gnat. So apologies. For those of you that aren't seeing this, just imagine me occasionally swatting a hand out there just to I don't know, liven it up a little bit. Back to the whole Excel thing. A lot of times, this goes back to my initial thing, is that sometimes we have a hammer. And so that's what we're using, and that we learn how to solve the problem with the hammer. And so we have a spreadsheet and we learn how to we define the problem in a way that it works for the spreadsheet. Now, a lot of times we give stuff up because we do that with anything. When you define it down, when you constrain it, by definition, you're removing options, you're, constraining it. But when you start to open it back up, and sometimes we don't know how we've constrained it, we don't understand where we have shut off avenues until we open it back up. And so sometimes it's really fun. This is like part of the joy of solving problems, is when we could take somebody from a spreadsheet that works, that does their stuff, but they've got all these issues with it where they have to copy it and they have to save it and they have to back it up. And if something happens, then it can like blow up the whole spreadsheet. And sometimes, a lot of times, they've got little custom VBA code and all these little things they're doing. And they would love to be able to integrate, but right now they copy and paste stuff all the time. And then they copy and paste and they have to correct the pasted data, all that stuff. You've probably felt that pain at some point, regardless of where you're at. When that gets turned around to maybe like just a form-based thing where it's like all the data entry is form-based and we can put all these kinds of validations in it and we can avoid breaking their data when they're adding new data. And then we can add sweeping, scripting type things. It's like, hey, if you click this button, it replicates that. And boom, you've suddenly got a new spreadsheet and it can reset some of your data, or we can integrate with other systems. So you're not having to copy and paste now. Now you click a button, or behind the scenes at night, all of that data gets pulled in, shoved into a report. Now you get to see your report. You can slice it, dice it, throw it into a business intelligence kind of thing, whatever. Those are the steps that when we start looking to those, to me, that is really where you're becoming the developer. And it's where it's almost, I think, confusing to some people that writing code may not be your strength. Like Michael said, it's like there's a lot of people that come into this as a developer and they didn't come out of it as a coder. So they maybe don't have the same, and this may be some of you, you don't have a broad range of computer languages and skills that you have, but what you are is a problem solver. So you look at it and you look at what is it that you have, what are the tool set that you've got there, and figure out a way. Again, it is a little bit square peg, round hole, but you find a way to make those things work. And how do you become a better developer? Is that you expand that tool set. You expand it so that when you realize, and I think that's part of that journey that we'll talk about, is when you realize that the solutions that you're building, the tools that you're using are not ideal, that you're having to do something. It's like, this doesn't make sense. I think you as you said, it's like, why should it be this way? Why can't we do it this other way? And when you start doing that, you explore where those tools, and sometimes that's how you create tools as well. So I can go give you, toss this back to you, give you some sort of closing thoughts on that whole journey of coder to developer.
Yeah, and in addition to I kind of want to add a little thing onto what you were talking about there with the spreadsheets and that. It doesn't necessarily mean for you to be a coder to have to necessarily work with these spreadsheets or these, screen scrapes, things like that. Your journey could even begin by looking at your business. You could be a paper-driven business or in a warehouse, and you see a process that, why are we doing this so many times? We could put this into a computer, we could write a little bit of code, we could automate this. A lot of the things to me for the journey from a coder to a developer is you start connecting those dots. You start looking, instead of me writing this one particular application for this one thing, you start looking at, how can I take these systems or these processes that we do on a day-to-day basis? How can I streamline that? How can I write code that basically makes my life better? And at that point, you're taking that step on becoming a developer, not just a coder.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best thing. If there's a parting thought that I think is important, is that being a better developer is not about code. It really is about solving problems. Now, yeah, as a developer, you're leveraging technology, so you're writing code. But there's sometimes I talk to my customers about this. I say sometimes the best solution is pencil and paper. Sometimes, and especially starting out, because if you automate stuff and code it and do all of that, and so now you replicate that solution a lot of times. If it's a crappy solution, then you are building crap faster. Yeah, it's one of those things that there are stories about businesses that every time they sold a product, they didn't figure out their cost structure right. So they were actually losing money every time they sold a product. And eventually they went out of business because they sold too many products. It cost them too much to advance to get the additional customers. And sometimes we have that same thing, that instead of writing a bunch of code and leveraging technology in a code sense, it may be better to leverage technology in a tracking data sense or something like that, which could go from maybe you just pencil and paper, and that's a pain to hand a folder all over the place. And instead now maybe it's just as simple as, instead of writing it on paper and sending it to, carrying it to the guy down the street, you use an email system, and it's, you didn't have to write any code. All you had to do was install something. But sometimes that's the first step in your journey to the developer side of solving problems and leveraging technology, particularly using what we have instead of having to reinvent the wheel, because that is another area that we get into way too often. And we may talk about that in a future episode. Probably will, because we have 31 up or more other episodes ahead of us in this season. As always, thank you so much for joining us for your journey to become a better developer, because we want to get there. We want you to get there, because when all of us get there, it saves us a lot of headaches and a lot of pain, and it helps our customers, it literally can make the world a better place, sometimes in very big ways, because it could be things like you're saving lives, you're doing better, it's maybe in hospitals or something like that, where it is literally saving lives. Sometimes it's making it better because you rate games that people have a fun time playing. It could be in all points in between. So as always, shoot us an email at info@developreneur.com if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, because we are open to those. We love to get feedback, love to take that, utilize that, and either work it into this season, the next episode, or sometime in the future. We may also have blog articles about it. We may have another little side YouTube post about it. If you're not watching us on our YouTube channel, you can go out to youtube.com. I think it's /Developreneur. You will get the Developreneur channel. If not, look up DEVELPRENEUR on YouTube, developreneuralso.com. You can see our site. We've got links out there to all of our stuff, including the school.developreneur.com. We've got blog articles. We have got hundreds of old podcast episodes, including hundreds of interviews with people ranging from rodeo clowns that are now working for Google to that actually spent some time in Blue Man Group, to creating our own song at one point, and also CEOs down to developers, from marketing to you name it. We've interviewed them, and they are really across the board. It's amazing how many interviews we have that were awesome, that I walked out of there, I was taking notes. There was maybe I think that I could count on one hand the ones that weren't that good, that were sort of okay, I'm running out of time, I need to get off of this interview. You're probably saying that to me right now, so I am going to let you go. Go out there and have yourself a great day, a great week, and we will talk to you next time. Bonus time. What's some bonus material that we can throw at them this time?
Actually, I'd kind of like to throw a couple of things on from our conversation. So you talked about screen scraping. So for those of you that might have been in the industry for a while or are still running into this, there are still analog ways of collecting data off of tape drives, off of data mining, off of hard drives, databases, things of that nature. So it's not just screen scraping we're always talking about. But there are areas where you need to get data as well, and you need to find ways of abstracting that data, be it through Excel, Access, databases, tape drives, things of that nature. So what we talked about, one example, that's not necessarily always the only example for that particular topic. So just to kind of keep an open mind that, some of the things, some of our experiences, while they may not fall exactly within what it is you do today, chances are it may relate in some way in what you do today. It might be a little more abstract, but a lot of the topics we cover are multi-purpose. So don't always take it that, oh, this is the only way. Like Rob said, object oriented, hammer, nail. You want to always be on the lookout for how can I apply that to what I do? Or in the problem solving sense, am I doing things the right way? Am I doing good processes? Do I have good processes in place? Are things streamlined the right way? Or am I writing out a sheet of paper, putting it in a binder, handing it to the next person? They add a sentence, hand it to the next person. Would it be better to have an email system? Would it be better to just have a data entry system? So these are things to think about along this journey with us this season.
I think my parting thought on this one is think about that tool chest that you have built over time. Is that as you get further into your career, one of the things that I find very useful is occasionally looking back at what you did 5, 10, 15, 30 years ago, whatever it was, because sometimes there are some things that you used to do that you've sort of grown out of because you've got different sets of tools where sometimes that is actually the best way to go. I don't know how many times I've looked at like old scripts that I used for various things, particularly like to chunk through data or split stuff up or to parse something. That I go back, I'm like, oh wow, that's actually something I could use right now. And sometimes the technology is all still here to be able to use that again. If you have like an old C program you wrote that, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have all these libraries and it doesn't have a graphical user interface and all that, but sometimes it is better to have just a little command line, little program that you run, that you feed it a file and it kicks something out. Parser would be an example. Is it maybe, or scraper of where it's like, hey, I just really need to get data out of this thing and put it somewhere else. And sometimes it's a lot easier, instead of having some drag and drop solution, to just feed the big honking file in, walk through whatever its format is, and start kicking data out on the other side. So don't be afraid. And I think it's actually a good habit to every so often review some of the stuff you did in the past and see if maybe that's something that applies to your work today. Or maybe, like we've run into this a few times, where it is a worthy project to dust it off and to revamp it in a new language, or to resurrect it because maybe it didn't make sense back then, but now it makes a lot more sense. Maybe you were ahead of your time, and now maybe your time has come to take that thing to put it out into the world. That being said, I'm going to let you go out there and put those things out in the world. This is season 22, episode 2. We've just wrapped this one up. We will come back to episode 3 and 4. And guess what? 5 and 6 after that. And we're just going to keep on working our way up until, again, we'll probably hit that 30, 35 range. And that will be season 22. And we'll come back to season 23. We're going to keep doing this at any rate. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we drop these things out. You can catch us on the podcast, catch us here on YouTube. And as always, we're going to continue just with this season. You're going to get bonus material if you catch us on video. You'll also see great things like Rob trying to swat gnats as they go by, and those kinds of things that you just don't catch. It doesn't translate well to the podcast. As I almost digressed into some of the things that come from the old radio. Oh, did I get it? Oh, almost got them. Anyways, that being said, I'll let you get back to it. I'm going to go kill this gnat or swat him out or do whatever I can with them, so that next time I will be able to just sit here calmly instead of trying to take this guy out. Mike, have a great day. The rest of you have a great time, and we will talk to you next episode. And as always, I got to go find, look, I'm going to the right spot now. I've got my